Good morning, everyone. We appreciate once again you listening to this lesson. This morning we'll be looking at 3rd John. So we invite you to get your New Testaments, if you would please, and turn to 3rd John. We do so much appreciate those kind remarks from individuals concerning these lessons that's been presented on YouTube over the last several months. We will continue these lessons even though we're back at the building on Sunday morning at 10, Wednesday nights at 7. And so again, if you're in the Trafalgar, Indiana area, we meet at Spearsville Road, Church of Christ. And my name is Charles Wright, and I'm the evangelist for the congregation there. The lesson this morning is a rather interesting lesson because there are very few passages of Scripture in the New Testament that tells us a little bit about what the early church was like. And it's not unusual for people to wonder what was the early church like. We know a lot about the leaders of the early church, such as the apostles Paul and Peter and James, but what about the average Christians themselves? Were they more spiritual than Christians today? Did they experience the same kind of problems seen so often in churches even today? Several books of the New Testament reflect the life of the early church, and again, this is especially true here of 3rd John. It is a private letter between John and a Christian named Gaius. It provides portraits, though, of 3 different men, and in so doing, it gives us a glimpse of the first century life within a local congregation. And so when one examines the portraits that are found within this letter, we learn that there's not really much difference between people back then and in the church today. And even though this epistle was written some 2,000 years ago, it is still very relevant today. And so again, we want to consider the background material that concerns this epistle. We want to notice the difference between these 3 men that are described in this particular letter, and then summarize just briefly at the end some of the lessons that can be learned from this particular book. And so let's begin by reading 3rd John. It says, "The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for those brothers, strangers as they are, who testify to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore we ought to support people like these, that we may be in fellowship with, we may be fellow workers, for the truth. I have written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us, and not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers, and also stops those who want to, and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. We also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. I had much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace be with you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends, each by name." And so let's talk a little bit about some background information from this particular chapter, this particular book within the New Testament. When we look at the author of this particular epistle, we recognize that it is the elder. As with 2nd John, the elder is believed by most people to be the apostle John. There's much internal evidence, a little external evidence, but primarily clearly we recognize the same language, the same ideas in all 3 epistles. They bear similarity as far as concepts and language also to the Gospel of John, and the term elder would really be a fitting description of John as he's writing here in his old age. The recipient of this letter is the beloved Gaius. Gaius was a common Roman name. It appears 5 times in the New Testament, several times in the book of Acts, also in the book of Romans, as well as 1 Corinthians. Whether he's one of those that's mentioned here by Luke or by Paul, we cannot determine, but it's evident that he was a dear friend of John and that he was known for his hospitality. The place, as far as the date of the writing of this book, is Ephesus, and it's usually suggested as the location, as he was known, John was, to live there in the latter years of his life. The estimation of the date of the writings is probably somewhere between 90 and 95 AD. And it's interesting, the primary purpose of this epistle was to confirm that Gaius did right when he supported those teachers who came his way. And he was encouraged to continue this hospitality as he had shown. Also, the purpose was to express condemnation of a man by the name of Diotrephes, because he rejected John, and he rejected others whom he should have received. But then also, thirdly, the purpose was to encourage this man Gaius to imitate what is good, and he commending Demetrius as a good example of that which he needs to do. And so we'll talk about these different sections of the scriptures in lessons to come, but let's make a brief comparison here between 2 John that we've just finished and 3 John. Both letters focus on the words simply love and truth. Again, 2 John 1 and 3 John 1 emphasizes those particular principles. But I want you to notice a difference. In 2 John, love is enjoined upon the people, but there's a warning against simply tolerating those who had denied the truth. In 3 John, love is something that is praised, and there is a commendation, a commending for supporting those who had proclaimed that truth. But another comparison that you can see is that 2 John condemns the departure from the truth, whereas 3 John condemns the lack of love simply among those who are Christians. So let's just talk about these 3 men for a few minutes. The 3 men of 3 John. There was Gaius, first of all, a man whom John simply would have prosper. A dear friend of John, whom he prayed would prosper physically as well as he did spiritually. John so loved and John prayed so often for Gaius because he's described here simply as a man who had a good reputation, one who walked in the truth, one who gave John great joy when hearing of his faithfulness, one who was hospitable toward all, one who was encouraged to continue supporting gospel preachers. But then the second individual, or the second man of 3 John, is Diotrephes. This is a man who wanted to be preeminent within the local congregation. And when you look at Diotrephes' character, you see that he's a self-promoter. He is simply striving to constantly always be first. He is insubordinate. Again, he would not receive the authority of the apostles, and John in particular. He was slanderous. The passage says that he spoke nonsense and that he slandered John in verse 10 of 3 John. He was vindictive. He would not receive certain brethren, and he would cast out simply other brethren. Diotrephes' character serves as a warning to us. In verse 11 of 3 John, it says, "He who does evil has not seen God." And then there is the third character, Demetrius. Demetrius was a man who would be a pattern. John encourages Gaius to imitate what is good, for he who does good, he says in verse 11 of 3 John, is of God. Demetrius appears to be offered as a pattern for Gaius, for Demetrius simply had a good report. From all the brethren, Demetrius had a good report. Even from the truth itself, Demetrius lived according to the mandates of God's word, to that so that his life would show clear evidence of the fact that he was a godly man, that he was a Christian. And then also, again, we recognize that he had a good report from John and from all of the apostles. And so we have these pen portraits, we could say, of these 3 men that are preserved in this particular letter. And it gives us some insight into the life of the early church. There were some good men. There was Gaius and there was Demetrius. But sadly, there was also some bad as well, like Diotrephes. Now, again, that's not much different than today even. that again, we recognize that within a local congregation, you'll have multiple good individuals that are there, but you may also have one that is bad, one that needs to correct things within their lives. And so let's apply this teaching that we've seen here so far. Let me give you 3 lessons that we can learn from 3 John, and we'll expand upon this in the weeks to come. But first of all, the first lesson simply is that Christians are not always what they should be. We need to understand that. Christians are not always what they should be. We may have to serve in the face of opposition from other brethren sometimes when indeed we are trying to do what is right. Will we allow this to affect our service? Will we allow this to affect our salvation, you see? Indeed it can. Both our service to God, which will lead also whether or not indeed if we serve God faithfully till death, our salvation as well. And so again, the opposition that we have sometimes within a local congregation and us willing to stand up against such and to simply make certain that we're doing what is right and confronting those who are doing that which is wrong. But then a second lesson we have to recognize is that Christians often imitate other Christians. John says to imitate what is good. And he gives you 2 reasons as to why you should do so. Those who do good, he says, are of God. Those who do evil do not know God. And so I ask you a simple question. What example are we setting within a local congregation? And again, who are we imitating within that local congregation? Gaius had the example of Diotrephes and Demetrius. Who do you suppose he would seek to imitate? Who would he want to be like? But then a third lesson from John, 3 John, is that Christians often allow the spirit of Diotrephes to reign within a congregation. Diotrephes was successful only because the members of that congregation allowed him to be such. They allowed Diotrephes to dominate. They would not take a stand for that which was the truth. They would not support those who took a stand for that which was the truth. Diotrephes was successful because there was a certain climate of complacency and indifference and literally even cowardice within the local church. They would not stand against him when he was doing and wanting to do that which was wrong. And so again, Diotrephes was able to get away with this domination. Strongly suggests to me that Gaius and Diotrephes probably were within 2 different congregations. They were not members of the same congregation, but in different congregations. And so as a result of such, we find this conclusion. Will we consider again some more truths that can be learned from this epistle? We'll continue looking at 3 John in the days to come or the weeks to come, but I hope that this introduction to this epistle, that this brief look at the 3 men of 3 John will stimulate your thinking. Ask yourself, what kind of example are you setting? Within a local congregation, what kind of example are you setting? And then secondly, if John had written a letter in which your name was mentioned, what would he have said about you? Would he have prayed for your prosperity? Would he pray that you be physically prosperous as well as you are spiritually prospering? Or would he have condemned you because of your seeking for prominence and preeminence within the church? Or would he have set you up as a pattern for others to follow? Which would he have described you? We have to recognize that if we will but walk in the truth like Gaius would have, we will have a good testimony again from all, like Demetrius did have such. And so again, we hope that these lessons are helpful to you. We'll continue looking at 3 John next week on Sunday morning, and so we invite you to come and be with us then. We're going to be finishing up 2 Peter on Wednesday nights, and so we invite you to continue to listen to those lessons as well. If you have any questions or desire to have correspondence from us or correspondence course, we invite you to let us know of such. We have a email website that you can contact. That's cmwright7015@aol.com. That's cmwright7015@aol.com. And again, if you're in the area, anywhere near Trafalgar, Indiana, we invite you to come and we invite you to worship with us Again, we hope that all is well with you, and we hope that all is well with your family. We hope that you're surviving this difficult times in which we are in, and that you will be able to do so as long as you continue to look toward God. And so we encourage you to do that. And so we bid you Godspeed.